If you want real security guarantees, if you want to actually ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine again, the very best security guarantee is to give Americans economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. The security guarantee and also the economic guarantee for Ukraine is to rebuild the country and ensure that America has a long-term interest.
Vice President Vance has infuriated military veterans in Britain and France by suggesting that neither of those countries have fought a war in the last 30 or 40 years. Vance, a US Marine Corps veteran, was speaking on Fox News about the security guarantees that Ukraine so desperately needed. And he said the only show in town was the minerals deal that America had offered Kyiv, and the only meaningful guarantee that Ukraine could hope to secure was giving America an interest in what he called an economic upside, effectively giving America a cash incentive to want peace in Ukraine. Washington has been pressuring Kyiv to sign a minerals deal to give America rights to Ukrainian rare earth metals and minerals. But in so doing, Vance dismissed what he said, the idea of 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years, when it's Britain and France which have stood up and said they are prepared to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. It's Britain and France which came to America's aid after 9/11, the only time in NATO's history that Article 5 has been invoked. It's Britain and France, among many other allies, which lost hundreds of their own soldiers fighting for and with America. It's a Britain and France who lost thousands of soldiers who were seriously wounded in the war in Afghanistan. They also fought alongside America in many other campaigns. Britain, of course, being with the United States when it invaded Iraq in 2003. Britain with the United States when it repelled Saddam Hussein's forces in 1991, among many other conflicts that British forces have fought in over the last 40 years. This has sparked fury, both from British politicians and from British veterans, many of whom are the same. I spoke to Britain's former Veterans Minister, Johnny Mercer, who said Vance should wind his neck in. I spoke to a former head of the Royal Navy, Admiral the Lord West, who said that Vance's comments were utterly disgraceful. Another former army chief asking me, what planet is he on? This has caused some really, really bad blood. JD Vance now appearing to try and row back on those comments, saying that he wasn't talking about Britain and France. But I think when you watch the clip on Fox News, when you know the context that Britain and France are the two nations that have been saying they are prepared to step up and put boots on the ground here in Ukraine to provide some sort of security guarantee for any possible peace deal in the future, and it's really impossible not to hear his comments as a sort of casual, dismissive slapdown of some of America's closest allies. And it's really that willingness to denigrate, to potentially betray America's closest allies that has got so many countries in Europe, including Ukraine, and so many countries in NATO, including France, the United Kingdom, concerned, which is to put it mildly, about the behavior of the current White House.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Another day, another potential massive transatlantic row between the new Trump White House and the British government. JD Vance, the Vice President, calls minor uproar today by suggesting that those countries that are pledging troops as peacekeepers in Ukraine haven't fought a war for 30 years and are ill-equipped to do so. Well, given that only Britain and France, two allies of the United States who fought side by side with the United States in Iraq and Afghanistan, are the only two countries so far to have pledged troops, that's been taken as a pretty big insult over here. We've had veterans, top brass, politicians, even Keir Starmer, taking for the first time a real attempt to actually say no to this new White House administration, say no, that's out of line. Keir Starmer's been trying to walk a tightrope for days. We saw him in the White House last week, desperately buttering up Donald Trump. This is the first time the British government have actually said, hang on, that's out of line. Even after that massive row between Zelensky
and President Trump and JD Vance in the Oval Office last week, the British government tried to keep a more of a sort of tighter line on that. They didn't want to go and take a swing of the bat like other countries did. But this time, I think it's an insult too much. Now, JD Vance has come out this morning and he's attempting to row back on those comments. He was saying he wasn't talking about the UK and France, but who he was talking about, therefore, remains something of a mystery. It's a bit of a blunder, I would say. Even if he didn't mean the UK and France, the fact his words have been so interpreted by veterans, by politicians, by serving soldiers, all piling in today to say, no, that's too far. So Vance seems to be playing a slightly sort of almost a Muttley figure to Trump's dastardly. He seems to be the one that was, turning the screw on Zelensky in the White House last week, the one that appeared to make him almost sort of lose his temper, and the one that actually piled in very quickly with the demands that Zelensky show some more respect. Of course, he came over to Europe last month, gave a speech at the Munich Security Conference where he basically directly had a go at Europe for their handling of migration, Britain for its handling of free speech. This is quite unprecedented. In the diplomatic world, not used to such blunt talk directly from a politician of his level. So he's casting his reputation as being a sort of a blunt talker, a man that doesn't mince his words. But this time he seems to have got himself into a bit of trouble. The US clearly still want the deal. It's in their interest to have the deal. They say it's a good deal. It means that it will be a security guarantee for Ukraine, in the fact that there'll be tens of thousands of US personnel essentially in Ukraine, which means it would be in America's interest to defend them, and that would be enough to put the Russians off. The Europeans, the UK, they think fine, that's a good start, but any negotiated peace will require peacekeepers, and that requires US backup as well. So that's where the argument is. I think this deal will happen. I think in the meantime, Trump and Vance are still fuming with Zelensky. They think he showed disrespect. They think they wanted to bring him to heel, essentially. They want him to apologize. And a lot of people around Donald Trump think that actually Zelensky having to move on, to go, to perhaps call an election or even just resign, is the key to making a possible peace deal with Putin. Now, obviously, that would go down incredibly badly in Europe, where Zelensky is still rightly seen as a hero, the man that didn't flee as the Russian tanks came over the hills, Putin was directly trying to kill him at one point. So the Trump White House appeared to have been essentially taken against Zelensky in a pretty firm and hard way. Whether he will apologize remains to be seen. He can be quite a stubborn man. He's a very proud man. But Donald Trump, also incredibly stubborn and demands respect. It's unclear whether Europe will be able to go this alone. Donald Trump essentially has said, time's up, America's had enough, we're not going to be funding this, we're pulling out. Europe, quite rightly, led by Macron and Keir Starmer, have said, fine, if that's the case, then leave it to us, let's put together some sort of ceasefire plan. Now, they're working at speed on that behind the scenes. Quite what it will look like remains to be seen, but what they have said it will require boots and planes on the ground. But to be a credible deterrent to Putin, they're insisting there has to be some sort of American backing for this plan. Now, I don't think Donald Trump is necessarily against that in the long run. He, however, is more concerned about getting any sort of peace deal in the first place that needs to be protected. The Russians are showing zero sign of coming to the table. I think that's why we're seeing Donald Trump essentially take quite a calmer, warmer tone towards the Russians than he is to the Ukrainians. He promised peace within a week of taking office. Obviously, that deadline is long gone now, and I think he's beginning to wonder whether actually perhaps he's bitten off more than he can chew, and if without the Russians coming to the table, there's very little that can be done. So the Americans are more focused on the front end of the deal, so to speak, where they think the Europeans are too focused on the back end. So something needs to give. Trump will be presented with Europe's plan in the coming days. He's the one that talks to Putin. We're a long way off, though, I think.